Hey everyone, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to wherever you're tuning in from. My name's Lee Robinson, and welcome to another live stream. If you've been following along on my live streams, I've been doing a series of interviews, conversations, whatever you want to call it, where I bring guests on and we talk about really anything and everything from tech to non-tech to e-commerce to design systems. If you missed them, it's okay. I actually just created a playlist on my YouTube channel that has all of the interviews, conversations, live streams I've done so far. And I'll continue to add on to that as I have more conversations. I think there's 6 or 7 more that I have scheduled. So definitely expect that to be coming in. Thanks to everyone who's going to be joining live. Just a quick reminder of the format for this. We'll be having some questions for probably 20 to 30 minutes. And then if you leave any questions in the chat, we'll make sure to get back to you and answer any things that you want to talk about related to education, e-commerce, really anything. We're open to whatever y'all want to talk about. So with that, I'm very excited today to introduce Rae Thompson. Rae Thompson is a developer advocate at BigCommerce, where she increases collaboration between developers and BigCommerce. And she's also a former teacher, which will be really fun to talk about. I was first introduced to Rae when she spoke at Next.js Conference 2020 and helped out with the collaboration between Vercel and BigCommerce, which is Next.js Commerce, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. But with that, please give a warm applause and welcome in the chat to Rae. Let me pull her up on stage. Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
Hi, everybody. It's going great. It's Friday, or well, no, it's Monday. Just kidding. I lost track of time. I'm on maternity leave. Sorry.
Yeah, the time has definitely flown in the past year. Earlier today, my wife was like, "Oh, it's March." I'm like, "What? Where did that come from?"
Yeah, I have no idea. I've lost all sense of time.
Especially too now that you're on maternity leave. Now you're just like in the zone. You're focused on one singular goal.
True. And yesterday was like chores day, so I just totally lost it. I thought it was Friday all of a sudden. It's Monday.
I don't blame you at all. I don't blame you at all. I have these days sometimes where I just completely don't go outside now, where I'll just like look out the window. I'm like, oh, it's cold out. I think I'm just going to stay inside today. I'm not going to do much.
Yeah, it's raining here in Austin today, so I wonder what's it like over in Iowa today.
It's actually sunny today, which is nice. We're in what we call right now Fool's Spring. So it looks like it's about to get warm, but inevitably we're probably going to get like some snow or some cold weather before it actually gets to the good stuff and we start getting into the real spring. So I don't know. I would much rather have normal Texas weather right now. Normal.
Yeah, not our abnormal.
Yeah, that is. It's been crazy. Been crazy there.
Yes,
for sure. Yeah, thanks to everyone who's joining. First live session joining. Yeah. Awesome. Hi from Brazil.
Awesome. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you all joining and leaving comments and questions. Today, really, it's just an opportunity to talk about all things education, e-commerce. We can talk a little bit about BigCommerce and Vercel and how that partnership happened. But maybe first, I think it'd be awesome to give just a little background on yourself, because I love the transition from more formal education into tech, and I think I'm curious to hear more about that and maybe why you made that transition.
Yeah. So. For the audience background, I was a special ed teacher for 8 years. I taught kids from pre-K all the way up into high school throughout the 8-year period. And what I really found was that even though I had this passion for teaching and this love for kids, it's really hard to be a special ed teacher for a long time. And I also loved engineering. I got a job as a program manager and was doing a lot of SQL. And the company that I worked for at the time really was just like, we need more people in our tech team, and pulled me into QA. And just let me go to town on testing and doing SQL queries and validating. And as I did that, I just wanted to learn more. So I went to a coding boot camp here in Austin called Austin Coding Academy.
Nice.
I learned C#.net and progressed to being a QA manager. And then really kind of missed the education piece of my life. And that's where I started seeing DevRel. I really started noticing people in the industry like Angie Jones, and some other people that were really like forefront of DevRel, especially in the QA space. And I wanted to do what they do. So when I saw the opportunity to come on over to BigCommerce and do DevRel, I jumped on it and I started learning React and trying to be a polyglot as much as I can. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the journey, but I still love teaching and education and curriculum building. And that's what I hope to kind of bring over to BigCommerce even more this year, is really getting deep into developer education when it comes to the platform.
That's amazing. There's a lot to unpack there. I think the one thing I'm really curious to hear more about is, I feel like a lot of people in the tech industry, developers, product managers, anything, could really benefit from more formal education around how to educate people, how to teach people what strategies work best for retaining content or, encouraging a group of people. Because as developers, whether we realize it or not, we're always selling, we're always teaching, we're always trying to get people to use our tools, understand why we should use our tools. And I think that if more people understood how to educate and talk about trade-offs and talk about how you use all these different libraries, it would ultimately result in a healthier tech ecosystem, which I'm sure you can probably agree with.
Oh, yeah, of course. And I think one of the things that we really forget is that people are multimodal. They don't learn the same. So you can't just do docs, and you can't just do live streams, and you can't just do step-by-step code walkthroughs. You really need to have a little bit of everything so that you can reach all the people where they are. And I think we have a tendency to kind of stereotype what an engineer is like and only go towards that stereotype. And we have a lot of different engineers. We have a lot of different countries that we're supporting, especially I think, Next.js and BigCommerce both being across the world, across the globe. We can't say how someone's going to learn something. So really being multimodal and taking into account that, there might be language differences. So taking some, English as a second language techniques and using those. I think there's just a lot of things that we could really unpack from just an elementary school teacher's toolkit that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the point about just the global nature of things. I've found, and I've probably neglected when I was first starting to teach people, just like you talked about, the different styles and strategies for teaching people and the different applications of those mediums. And now that I've, got more into it, I wish that I had had more of that education at the start to understand how to connect with people. Because when I hear people say, this documentation was great, I would love to have this in something like a video content, because, I prefer to watch and to hear that content. That's really what makes it stick for me. Just reading the documentation isn't necessarily enough for me to learn this. When I hear those, it makes me remember, when you're putting out content for these large audiences around the world, you have to think about all those different types of ways that people learn.
Yeah. And I mean, I know for myself, I'm a very audio, I need something dictated to me for it to really stick. If somebody just hands me a card with a date on it, I'm not going to remember to go and do that thing on that date. If somebody tells me though, and I can hear, that audio input, it really sticks. So I know that for me, that's where videos and conversations like this are really helpful. But then there are those learners that are like, my husband or my sister who are very introverted, and they want to just kind of consume it on their own in their own time, really let it sink in. And that's where, docs and other types of mediums are really helpful.
Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on providing, like, how you provide feedback to let them know that they're learning things correctly. This is something that I'm trying to learn more about and understand maybe the best ways of doing this, because just a small example, I'll step back a little bit. In the courses that I made before, there wasn't necessarily a way for students to know that they were doing things correctly unless they talked to me, a very manual process of me saying, hey, this is good. And then, part of what we have with the Next.js Learn tutorial, nextjs.org/learn, is there's actually like multiple question and answers at the end of sections so that you can get some kind of feedback, knowing whether you're on the right track. I'm curious to see where this goes going forward with teaching programming concepts in general, because one thing I find really interesting here, I'm not sure if you've seen this before, it's called Github Classroom, I believe. Yeah. And it's like, I love the idea of making something like a code review a more integral part of the education experience, because that's what people are actually doing. Like on the day-to-day, they're submitting their code, people are reviewing it, and having that as part of the education like loop and feedback, I think is really awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we're kind of changing a lot of things from traditional education terms into like the techie version of that. So, that like positive reinforcement is basically gamification. It's the same kind of concepts. If I'm being positively reinforced and being told that, yes, I'm on the right track, or I get that green check mark, I get those points, it's the same thing as that gamification of getting badges and getting levels and all of that. So I really see like those two things going together, and we know that those are best practices in education. If people feel positive and they feel reinforced, they're going to keep going rather than having kind of like a negative reinforcement or the lack thereof if they don't feel like they're getting somewhere, right? Other things too, like I really enjoy how a lot of programs are going towards the built-in IDE that kind of gives you that check on the line, right? So I think it's, like Free Code Camp and others, it's like as soon as you make a mistake, it kind of like gives you a warning. And then, if you submit it anyway, it kind of tells you what you did wrong right away so that you can correct it and go on to the next thing. So you feel successful, like, again, really quickly. So you don't have that negative reinforcement forever. It's like really quick, and then you move on to something positive.
Absolutely. Hey, in the chat. Hey, Michael, shout out to Angie too. Follow her on Twitter. And hey from Kenya. Thanks so much for joining. So cool to see everybody tuning in. I want to quickly dive further on what you're talking about there. Having things like Code Sandbox or the Repl.it or Stack Blitz, like these things, online IDEs, even the GitHub code spaces, reducing the barrier to entry, basically for people trying to learn programming or just in general get up to speed or up to date. Like, it really democratizes how difficult it is to get things running. And in doing that, I feel like it brings the education to a whole new space of developers who, setting up a local development environment can be painfully hard sometimes. So having that as part of your learning material too is really, really beneficial, I think.
Yeah. And it just really brings in that like real world, real life. Like, I remember being a junior person in tech, like being a junior QA, and then like trying to get certain things set up and trying to just get coding for the first time. And you're really reliant on senior engineers to like kind of guide you and help you. And if there's things that help make that process faster, like I know our team, for instance, did a lot with DevOps in order to make it to where you got feedback really quickly, or your code wouldn't, like if it didn't compile, like you would get like a review of some kind going so that, senior engineers would be able to meet up with you and tell you why. And so those kinds of things I think are pivotal early on when you're still not in the workforce to get used to, because when you do transition in, those are kind of new norms that are happening, but they're still all in that realm of education and learning and growing.
Absolutely. What do you think your experience is coming from a background learning with QA and learning about testing best practices, and then moving into a role with education and trying to help developers see that? Because I think that there's a percentage of developers who don't ever really learn the testing side of things. And then there's also a percentage of developers who don't understand I guess really the pivotal role that somebody in QA or the people trying to make sure your application is resilient play. I think people who have a background in that actually bring a really fresh perspective to the table and understanding how that works. Is that something that you feel like you've seen, and because of your background, you feel stronger because of it?
I do. I, like everyone else, I still have my moments of imposter syndrome and all that good stuff. But I think the thing that QA and having a testing or like DevOps type background bring to the table is that you get like a resiliency because you're used to failure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're anticipating failure. Like you're anticipating things to go wrong, right? And you're trying to look for things that are oddities all the time that aren't normal. And I think with that resiliency and that like ability to overcome and think positively, because that's how you get your product to be better, is you fail fast, you overcome it, and you go on to the next level, right? Sometimes I think that as developers, we get very like emotionally tied to our code and emotionally tied to our bugs. And we just we got to let it go. We just got to, we got to let them like go off into the wild, but like really say the next iteration or the next like sprint, we're going to overcome it and we're going to get on to the next thing. And not hold on to like bad legacy code that we know is just not good.
Yeah, there's an adage or something about that where it's like the best code is the code you never write, which is like slightly unpractical, but at the same time very true. Like the more code you have, the surface area of the amount of bugs you're going to have is also going to go up. So you have to find that like happy balance between, it's not like I'm not going to write code, but I have to be thoughtful about the code that I write.
Yeah, and I think it's like, at least from my perspective, it's been a lot easier to laugh at my mistakes because it's just one of those things that like, I'm going to have bugs too. Like I've written buggy tests, like it happens, you know? And so you have to really think through and logically just kind of give yourself that grace to be like, you know what, this code is just going to go in the trash and we're going to start over. And everybody makes mistakes, and the faster you can get over it, I think that's how you learn, and the more senior you become, even quicker. I know that a lot of people ask me like, how did you move up so quickly, or how did you get through this career path so quickly? Mm-hmm. And it's really just being able to say like, when you make mistakes and learn from them and grow that much faster, rather than holding on to things and internalizing them and thinking that you're a bad coder and not allowing yourself to progress. You have to like let it go and just keep learning, keep growing.
I could not agree more. I think that's great advice for anybody listening who's trying to understand how they advance in their career too, because having that humility and that ability to understand, having a mistake or writing bad code doesn't define you as a programmer or as somebody in your career, and how you move forward is really what sets you up for success. So I do love that advice. I'm curious to hear more too about BigCommerce, where you work. Yeah. Could you maybe talk about, for the people who don't know anything about BigCommerce or what y'all are trying to do, and just give a quick overview?
Yeah. So at BigCommerce, we're an e-commerce platform. We are not open source like Magento, and we're not completely SaaS like Shopify, where we define ourselves as open SaaS in the middle. So we really try to differentiate by being this open platform in which you can utilize our APIs to the fullest. You can build applications as a tech partner to support the platform and increase our capabilities, or you can be an agency or freelance developer building e-commerce sites for merchants. And what we're really like trying to focus on and accomplish is being the best e-commerce platform that is open to developers and giving the best developer experience as we can, so that you guys can really take and be creative in what you want to accomplish in the e-commerce space.
How do you strike that balance between like full SaaS or fully open source? Because yeah, there are some parallels too, I feel like, with how Vercel does things, with having like one of our core products, or one of the core things that we work on, be Next.js, which is open source. It's always difficult to understand like how you manage that relationship.
Yeah, so we have several open source libraries and code repositories. So, with Vercel, we have our data hooks for headless, which is one of those code bases. And then, of course, we also have our open checkout, which really was a differentiator in the market, to have someone that can create a fully custom checkout experience using our base. But what I think kind of makes us in the middle is the fact that like we do want to take on a lot of responsibility for the developer to not have to do a lot of maintenance. So when you're doing a site on BigCommerce, we want to take a lot of the infrastructure needs, a lot of the security needs off of your plate, so that you don't have to focus on that. All you have to focus on is really creating that custom user experience that is going to make the site or make your application shine within BigCommerce.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially the open checkout piece. And I believe I saw that y'all partnered with Fast, right?
Yeah.
Too?
Yeah, Fast is one of our tech partners.
Nice.
And they're embedded in our platform, and you can add it in as a merchant as one of our tech partners. But the really cool thing about open checkout is like it really allows you to add in whatever customization you want. So whether that's doing a buy online, pick up in store offering that's completely custom and unique, giving people the ability to go to an Amazon locker and pick up their orders from there, really being flexible.
There's a good question here from Michael about getting familiar with BigCommerce. What's the balance between dev friendliness and client friendliness? That's a tough one to strike as a company. Like, where do you make that? You obviously want to be as dev friendly as possible, and then you also have to offload some things, right, to your hosted solution.
Yeah, so depending on how you want to implement BigCommerce, if you're doing it via our traditional storefront, then a lot of it is very agency friendly and very easy to implement in terms of using our control panel and using like the developer tools from there. But we really try to make it to where if something's in that control panel area, clients are also very easily able to navigate and find tools and do what they need to do as well. So it's kind of a collaborative effort on that piece between a dev and a client. Also then like going headless, that headless is a dev beast, right? Most merchants are not going to implement a headless solution all by themselves, unless they're a developer. And then we're like, you know what, you got this, because we make it that super, super open. Everything's documented in our docs, and my team on the DevRel side and our customer service teams are there to help and support. So I would say in terms of a headless implementation, it's really more dev focused and dev friendly. And that's a little less merchant friendly. But then you're kind of expecting that, I think, in a way.
I think then the hope too is, right, so with partnerships like people like Fast or just other add-ons too, then you kind of get a little of best of both worlds ideally, because you're making it easy for devs to get started, but then providing it the extra integrations to make the platform easier to use with something like any of those external services, right?
Yeah, like really just taking what you want, right? I think that's the best part about being headless or being in a Jamstack type architecture, is that you get a lot of freedom as a development team and even as a merchant to kind of dictate what you want to be built, versus kind of having to use something that might not be as open. But the tech partner ecosystem is really where I think this is enhanced on BigCommerce, because we give you a lot of tools and a lot of freedom to create whatever it is that you need to create.
That makes a lot of sense to me. On the topic of, I guess, dev friendliness for headless and BigCommerce in general, one thing that I'm curious about, because I'm still pretty new to this space, I would say, and understanding all the different headless e-commerce solutions. And one thing that I find really interesting is solutions that come with a GraphQL API. And I'm curious, maybe more like what your thoughts on the value proposition for that. Like, why would I use a GraphQL API for accessing my e-commerce data? Is it for allowing me to stitch things together? Or, like for somebody who doesn't know anything about that, why would that be useful?
Yeah, so we have a REST and a GraphQL API, and our GraphQL API is really mainly for the storefront, to easily get your data and load it really quickly. And I think that's the value prop of GraphQL, is like the enhanced performance, because you can grab more data at one time and have it populate to the web view so much faster. Rather than having to do so many individual queries and so many calls to an API. So that's really where I think GraphQL shines. And then, as GraphQL matures, as companies mature, I think we'll see a lot more in terms of mutations and being able to manipulate data with GraphQL. As for BigCommerce right now, a lot of the manipulation of data is done through REST. But I think that for now, that is where you can do a lot with serverless functions. You can really utilize a lot of architectural patterns that haven't been able to be done before, in terms of like having all these serverless options like Vercel, or having AWS, or having Azure functions, those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing too, building off that's been interesting for my limited prior GraphQL experience, but I've used it before in collaboration with a React Native application, specifically in what you were talking about due to performance in the React Native case for making less network requests, because I think that was one of the original reasons why GraphQL was adopted for Facebook, was to, I have to fetch a bunch of different information from a bunch of different places. And I'm on my mobile app where those resources are very, costly, those network requests are. So I want to ideally just make one request, fetch all that stuff together, which I think is really, really nice. We can probably just talk about this one right now while we're on the topic of it, but React Native versus native development, which is future-proof?
That's a rough one.
that is a rough one. I'll give my thoughts, and then I'm curious to hear your thoughts too. I don't think no solution is fully future-proof, because you're always going to have the maintenance cost of updating things, and like we talked about earlier, right? Like all code. Actually, there was a comment up here that I hadn't highlighted yet, but bugs are always going to be there. You just get better at solving them. I feel like that ties into basically what I was going to say, which is it's not that there's necessarily one better than the other. I will say, though, that the two big trade-offs to me, one for React Native, it's very appetizing for a company who already has developers working in the JS space. and the React space on the web, and they're trying to get into mobile. I know that I've been in this exact position before, where the company I worked at, where we already had all these people who understood JS and React. So it was pretty much a no-brainer for them just to take that knowledge that people already learn and just apply it to another platform, while also shipping Android and iOS at the same time. So for them, the trade-offs of the maybe not a perfect native mobile development, but close, was worth it. But then on the inverse, I feel like there are situations where truly native app development, focusing specifically on one platform or the other, can have benefits if you need to take advantage of some of the really fine-grained details of building mobile apps, but it's highly, highly context specific. Like, it really depends on what you're trying to build. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. I think there will always be a place for native development in terms of, I only want to build for iOS, or I only want to build to Android because that's where my user base is. I think in terms of large scale enterprise, we will see more of the React Native or Ionic or, any of those frameworks, Xamarin, all of them. I think we will see more enterprises going that route because it's just one code base to maintain versus like trying to have 8 code bases and 8 teams. And I think the more distributed we get, the more remote we get, the more we'll see code repositories trying to go towards a singular repository. And I think mono repos might kind of start to be more normalized as we see more remote teams and people being more remote. I don't think after COVID, we're going to go back to a really standard office space type thing. And I don't think we've been that way in tech for a long time.
Nope.
So, the more we get to that model of being out and about, I see native libraries like React Native or those kind of frameworks just really being popular.
Absolutely. There's another question here about specifically for BigCommerce for custom reports. If this is easier answered later, definitely let me know. But is there plugins for custom reports or for reporting?
So I don't actually know how much I can say at this point, but reporting and analytics is a big push this year. Nice. And I think that's kind of like on for sell side too. And I think that's a big thing for everyone. We've gone through this data storm over COVID because everything's gone to the web. So analytics now is just even more important. So that's definitely a big focus for this year. And, we're really utilizing a lot of partnerships to do that. So, we have partnerships with Segment and some other data analytics tools that will really be helping us push that throughout this next year.
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat. We just launched a brand new usage page that's way more in depth on how you consume resources because, large scale teams need that stuff. And then going further too, just when you reach a certain level, more than just your hobby project, right? You want to know the fine-grained details about how your system is performing from a monitoring and an observability standpoint. And we've been working with partners for very similar things, trying to nail down things like our Datadog integration to provide like tracing throughout your system. And I'm excited to see how that continues to develop because I know that a lot of people are looking towards that.
Yeah. It just really helps you get even more information. And I know that's like a big thing for wanting to understand your users and especially wanting to understand your consumers. So as we go forward this year, I know BigCommerce definitely has an eye on that, and it's a big push for this year.
Absolutely. I'm scrolling up here a little bit to catch up on some of the chats, but I see this one. Someone's building a website with Next and Algolia, Firebase. That is absolutely a solid stack that you have going there.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. I'm glad you're enjoying the channel. I'm glad you're enjoying our chats. I appreciate everybody joining in, leaving questions. Feel free to leave any questions down below, and we'll try to get to them. And yeah, Clubhouse has been an interesting case study in native app development. First, they did the iOS one, and then they hired people, and they're working on the Android one right now. But yeah, it is interesting how you can take advantage of some of the native platform and ship once and then get to the other one.
Yeah, and I've actually done that with React Native too. Is I think every app that I've worked on in previous companies, we always did iOS first and then followed up quickly with Android. I don't know why that was always the architectural choice, but one was a Xamarin app and one was React Native, and we both did that. It was always shipped iOS and then followed up quickly with Android.
Yeah. Yep. I've been in the same boat before as well too. One thing it'd be fun to talk about, I think, for people who don't have the context that we do, is about Next.js Commerce, which is really exciting. And I think just to give like a little bit of history for people joining in, last October at Next.js Conf 2020, Vercel and BigCommerce partnered together to release Next.js Commerce, which is essentially an all-in off the ground running with like a really high performance e-commerce store that's backed by BigCommerce. And I've been really impressed and excited to see the adoption of that and how fast it's grown and how many people are enjoying using that to build their own stores. I think in the e-commerce space, I'm sure you can relate with this a lot. It's awesome when you see people like starting their own businesses and like starting their own stores using that technology. It's very empowering.
Yeah, and I really love the fact that like developers can be entrepreneurs and they can take what they're doing and really productize it. I love seeing engineers and developers becoming more productized and really utilizing their skills in new ways. And the fact that BigCommerce can help there, and especially with Next.js Commerce, because it's already so like it's already done. It's really great. It's like at that point it's plug and play, which is like I think every developer's like favorite thing is just to take pieces out and put new pieces in.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen quickly for people who haven't seen it, because one, I love the team at Vercel. They have some really great people who can do front end work. Like just some of the animations and designs here are incredible, and our design team is really great too. So I love this. I love this landing page. It's really nice. But yeah, I'll just show a quick demo, and maybe you can talk through a little bit while I click around just some of the cool stuff that BigCommerce provides here, because it's amazing how well they pair together.
Oh yeah. So on this page, for instance, this is really being fed data from BigCommerce. So the front end is really just rendering data that's coming in from the BigCommerce GraphQL API for the product images, for the product descriptions, the names, and then also on that like header bar, being able to search and do other things, that's kind of being run by the BigCommerce APIs on the back end. So you can really see like how fast it is, and being able to just kind of hit those APIs, get the data back as soon as possible and render a site. And a lot of the speed of the front end is coming from Next.js, and the fact that we're being able to use these web hooks and data hooks that are just so awesome that your team built out with our team. It's crazy. And how fast we did this. Like they started development, I think, on this in August, like late August, and it was done by the conference at the end of October. So that was like a marathon in a sprint.
Oh yeah. I was blown away as an outsider watching this all come together, because I have a certain affinity or love for e-commerce. I just love seeing people build their own storefronts, and seeing this come together so quickly was really fun.
Yeah, I can't thank Belle enough. Okay, Belle on Twitter, if you need to look her up. She's awesome. She led a lot of this along with Nate Stewart on our side. So it was amazing to see those two like really collaborate and get this together.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited to see them continuing work on this too, and just making all sorts of nice functionality and features. I would expect more news on that some point, but they keep rolling out cool stuff here, which I'm really excited about. Even the little things too, like having internationalization built in is amazing for people who want to roll this out in multiple countries. So I love that. And we were talking before we went live too, just about all the amazing online e-commerce experiences that are popping up. We have a couple that I like to show and just talk through, but if anyone else has some cool ones you want us to pull up, feel free to put I don't think you can put links in the chat. I think YouTube blocks them, but if you put a name and we can search it, because I love looking at just these futuristic e-commerce sites. This was one that you mentioned.
Yeah. This is one of the merchants from BigCommerce, Lark water bottles. They're super cool water bottles. They have UV light in them to like disinfect the bottle, disinfect the water.
That's amazing.
And they charge with just like a micro USB charger. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like you could be on a really long hike and not have to worry about your water getting like gross. Or like your water bottle smelling like after time. So these guys are wonderful. And I love that I love their UX UI and how they market it. I feel like they've done a really good job on their headless site here.
Yeah, this is really, really nice. I like it a lot. I have no practical use for one of these. Like I don't think I would take advantage of it, but all of a sudden I want one.
Oh yeah, we actually got these as part of our Christmas package from BigCommerce, and I didn't think I would utilize it, and then I went to the hospital to have my baby in January, and I brought these with me, and it was a lifesaver because like being in the hospital, you don't want to have like anybody else's stuff touch your stuff, and it was great. Like these things were amazing.
I thought of another one that I really like. I just love the design of this online bike store, especially because they're electric bikes, which I just find so interesting. But yeah, like clicking on this, like what a just absolutely incredible design when you like toggle this. Like even changes the colors in the room, like just some next level stuff.
Oh yeah, this is awesome. And I think too, like there's a lot that can be done with 3D and AR now.
Oh yeah.
One of our partners, 3Kit, they actually do like a widget inside of BigCommerce where you can send them your 3D renderings and they'll create like a little micro app that you can just like using BigCommerce just pop right into your page and it's done.
Yeah, that is incredible. I've seen a few of those. I don't have one pulled up, but I know that I've seen a few examples that absolutely blew my mind. I think there was one, it was like an IKEA style like shelf, and it had a full 3D model that you could like twist around to see the different side of it and like add things to it or take pieces off.
Yeah, it's super crazy nice. What we can do now, like with utilizing either partnerships or even just building out the functionality and being able to like pop it in as a component.
Oh yeah. This was one I had pulled up. I don't know if the site's actually live or not. But there was a new site that Kanye did, or his design team did. And it's like, I've never really seen an e-commerce site like this. Let me zoom in a little bit. And like you click.
This is insane.
And they just like go onto the model who is modeling the clothes. So cool. It's these like, these new ideas and these new experiences that really take the feeling of shopping in person and putting it into the online world. I love this.
Oh yeah. Especially like in a COVID world where you're not able to go to the store necessarily like you used to, or if like you're like me and you don't feel comfortable going out to a store right now, like these kinds of things just really bring you into that experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really neat.
That is it is really neat.
If anyone has cool ideas for e-commerce, feel free to drop in the chat. I love looking at these and seeing kind of what the future looks like in terms of all the different options and opportunities that you have. But yeah, I love looking at those. There's a few questions in the chat that I haven't got back to, but let me check. Very excited about that reporting functionality. So that's great.
I'm glad we can provide that.
Absolutely. Do payment integration companies provide a GraphQL API? I'm not sure. Do you know if any of the payment providers that you work with would expose GraphQL, or is that something that you don't really even need to think about as the developer integrating it usually?
So in terms of BigCommerce, whether you're using Open Checkout, which is like our open source code, as long as you're like using our payment methods with the Checkout SDK, you really don't have to worry about a GraphQL implementation too much. I don't really know of any payment providers off the top of my head that have an open GraphQL API.
Yeah.
I think there might be some things with, PCI compliance and different things, like maybe it just hasn't gotten to that point yet. But I know in terms of like, if you're a developer building to BigCommerce and you just want to use our solutions, they're fully integrated. So you don't have to do any of the payment integrations yourself.
Yeah, which is really nice because payments are the tricky part. I feel like I would not want to be doing my payments by hand in 2021. I'd much rather use someone else's system.
Yeah, you can integrate Stripe into, if you want to just have Stripe or some kind of other payment solution as part of your headless architecture and still use BigCommerce, but not use our checkout, and you want to use them, like that's totally fine and open. Like we offer it as part of our services that you can utilize it, but you don't have to. And I think that's one of the greatest things about just headless in general is like, use what you want to and let your product needs dictate what you use.
I agree. Yeah, it looks like Braintree might be one of the providers that has GraphQL. Thanks for that suggestion.
Awesome.
If you want to check that out. Yeah, talking about Next.js Commerce, could developers take that template and then make getting started even easier? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the entire intention between what the Next.js side and the BigCommerce side was, how can we provide something that's easy to get started? You just use a deploy button and you go all the way through the, a few clicks, and then you have your project live and you set things up, all the way from that to even the more advanced use cases, wanting to make it as easy as possible for people to start, but then also extend it and customize things as they see fit.
Yeah, and really the components are broken up in such a way that it's so easy to just like take a component out and put a new one in. If you want to use, the BigCommerce side and you want to use those data hooks, it's there. If you want to take one out and you want to plug in your ERM or your OMS, whatever, if you have like your ERP solution, all those things, like you can just take whatever you want out and put in your API and you're good to go. So it's really like a very easy template to use. I think it's just like kind of figuring out how you want to architect your solution. That's the hardest piece.
Oh yeah. And two, from a product design standpoint too, I had somebody asked me a question the other day about Next.js Commerce for restaurants. Like they wanted to have more of the, if I'm ordering a pizza, I want to be able to select the sauce and the toppings, and that it's like technically like you can do that. You'll have to build it kind of yourself a little bit. You'll have to extend it, but it'd be cool to even take that idea further and have more templates for each style of e-commerce, because there's so many different things you can sell online, and each experience is like a little bit different, like clothing or food or digital products.
Yeah. I think templatizing headless is really going to be the future. Like how can companies or how can partnerships even like ours, like templatize more and create more kind of like headless themes and see how that works for developers to engage and grab onto a framework and hold on to it a little bit longer. If they have a good template, a good starting point, then it makes it a whole lot easier to hold on to something and keep going with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going great here. Thanks for joining. We appreciate everyone joining in. I see your comments. I do see them. Feel free to DM me after on Twitter and I can help you out. I just don't want other people to, they probably don't want to hear me talk about this, but feel free to DM me and I'll help you out. I'm glad you're enjoying using Next.js.
Awesome.
In the past 3 years. Yeah, pizzas are linked product builders for sure. You're just stacking all the different ingredients on top of each other. Nice. Well, I do want to be conscious of your time. I know that congrats on the baby. You're on your maternity leave, and I don't want to take up too much of your time off. So I just want to say I really appreciate you joining today. Super fun to talk about education, e-commerce, and just learn more about the fun stuff you're working on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you, everybody who showed up online. And if you're watching this in the future, thank you. So yeah, if you guys need anything in terms of e-commerce support, if you just want to chat about e-commerce in general, I don't mind talking to anyone. So reach out to me on Twitter. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you. And thank you guys for the congratulations. He's adorable, and I'm sure Dad's ready for Mom to come back.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to your day. Enjoy the rest of it.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.